The 88mm round, 3.5 inches of high-velocity steel, hit before anyone heard the gun. The Churchill to their right simply opened up, peeled back like tin. 3 men inside. Now none. Black smoke rolled across the crest. The corn was burning. The smell wasn't weed anymore, just diesel, rubber, and something no one wanted to name. 70 meters uphill, about 75 yards, a panther sat motionless in the tree line. Engine off. Commander watching through field glasses. He'd counted 11 British tanks that morning. This one made 12. Somewhere behind the hedgerow, a radio crackled. Able 3, this is Sunray. Report position, over. No response. There won't be one. How many times do you send men up the same hill before you admit the hill has already won? This is Hill 112. The Germans called it Kalvarienberg, Calvary Hill, the place of skulls, 112 meters above sea level, roughly 370 feet. A wheat field between 2 rivers, 10 kilometers southwest of Caen, about 6 miles. From the top, you could see 15 miles in every direction, nearly 25 kilometers of open ground. Whoever held this ridge controlled the approaches to the entire British sector. Both sides knew it. That was the problem. By late June 1944, 3 weeks after D-Day, the breakout hadn't happened. Caen was still a fortress, and the ridge was held by the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions, veterans of the Eastern Front, equipped with Tiger tanks that could destroy a Churchill from 2,000 meters, well over a mile. The British 6-pounder, 57mm, had to close to 500 meters, under 550 yards, to even hope for a penetration. 2,000 versus 500. That's not a disadvantage, that's an execution. If you've seen our Falaise Pocket episode, you know these units. The 50,000 Germans trapped and destroyed at the end of Normandy? That doesn't happen without what happened here first. The armor that should have escaped Falaise bled out on this hill. Operation Epsom launched on June 26th. Most of the men crossing the start line that morning had never seen a German tank. By nightfall, they'd seen nothing else. 8th Corps, under Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor, the same O'Connor who destroyed an Italian army in North Africa, pushed south with 3 divisions and over 600 tanks. And the weather betrayed them immediately. Low cloud, rain, the typhoons couldn't fly. The infantry cleared positions at bayonet point. Village by village, hedgerow by hedgerow. The Scottish infantry went first, the 15th Scottish Division pushing through minefields and mortar fire to reach the Odon. The river crossing was chaos. Engineers building bridges under direct fire, infantry wading through chest-deep water with rifles held above their heads. German artillery walking shells along the riverbank, adjusting range with each salvo. Men drowned. Not from the current. The Odon is barely a stream in summer. They drowned because the weight of their kit pulled them under when they stumbled. 70 pounds of equipment, over 30 kilograms, in 4 feet of water, chest deep, just over a meter. And some of them never made it to the other side. By June 29th, tanks of the 11th Armored Division had crossed and climbed the slope. They reached the crest. For 6 hours, they held it. 6 hours. That's how long the victory lasted. 2nd SS Panzer Corps counterattacked from 2 directions. Tigers and Panthers emerging from the orchards south of the hill, firing as they advanced. The fighting turned medieval. Tanks dueling at ranges under 400 meters, less than 440 yards. The 23rd Hussars lost a significant portion of their strength in a single afternoon. And I want you to hold this image, because I read it in a sergeant's account, and I haven't been able to let it go. The orchards were in bloom. June in Normandy. Apple blossoms falling on burning tanks. That's what Hill 112 looked like. Beauty and slaughter on the same ground, so at the same moment. Crews who bailed out of burning hulls had nowhere to go. The hilltop was bare. Some crawled into shell craters. Some didn't make it that far. By nightfall, intelligence indicated additional panzer divisions converging on the corridor. O'Connor looked at the casualty reports and made the call. The hill wasn't worth it. Not today. They gave it back. Over 4,000 casualties, dozens of tanks destroyed, and nothing to show for it except the knowledge that Hill 112 could be taken. The men who'd bled for that crest had to watch from below as German infantry reoccupied the positions they'd cleared hours earlier. The division's war diary records the withdrawal in flat, factual language. The tone tells you nothing. The casualty figures tell you everything. It just couldn't be held. That was the first time. And the second attempt came on July 10th, Operation Jupiter. The 43rd Wessex Division, farm boys from Somerset, Wiltshire, and Cornwall. Most had never seen combat. Same hill, same defenders, same problem. At 0500 hours, over 700 guns opened fire. Survivors described the barrage as physical, a wall of sound that made breathing difficult even behind the lines. The Wessex Division advanced behind it. They reached the crest by mid-morning. For 2 hours, it looked like victory. Then the 9th SS came back. Not attacked, came back. Like they'd never really left. The counterattack hit with armor and Nebelwerfer rocket batteries, the Moaning Minnies. Each salvo put 36 rockets into an area the size of a football pitch, roughly 100 meters by 60, the length of a city block. The concussion killed men with no visible wounds. The sound, something between a scream and a moan, seemed to come from inside the hill itself. The radio nets dissolved. Dog 3, we are overrun. Repeat, we are overrun. Fire for effect on our position. Drop it on us. Now. British artillery dumped shells directly onto their own men's coordinates. The plateau vanished in smoke and flying chalk. Soldiers fought hand-to-hand in the craters. Bayonets, shovels, empty rifles swung as clubs. The men tried to dig in. The chalk subsoil broke their entrenching tools. They scraped at the ground with bare hands. 18 inches of depth was all they could manage. Less than half a meter. Then the mortars found them. Tree bursts showered the shallow scrapings with splinters and steel. 30 degrees Celsius, 86 Fahrenheit. No water. Sight the wounded couldn't be evacuated in daylight. Any movement drew sniper fire. You could trace the paths of the men who dragged themselves downhill by the marks they left in the chalk. There was an artillery observer. I read his account years later, and it never left me. He was watching from 3 kilometers back, nearly 2 miles. Could see the infantry crossing the start line, could see the German machine guns opening up, could see his men falling. He called in fire support. Perfect coordinates. But by the time the shells arrived, the Germans had displaced. His rounds landed on his own soldiers. 40 years later, he was still talking about it. By nightfall, the 5th Duke of Cornwall's light infantry had ceased to exist as a fighting unit. Over 250 casualties in a single battalion. Their commanding officer was dead. Most company commanders were dead or missing. 3 times that day, the crest changed hands. By dark, the British held the northern slope. The Germans held the crest. The line was drawn through the middle of a wheat field, marked by burning hulks and wire. That was the second time. The third attack never came. Not really. Not as a single operation. Instead, Hill 112 became something worse. A constant battle. Probing attacks, nightly infiltrations, artillery duels lasting hours. The Germans called it Materialschlacht, a battle of materials. Who could bleed longer? The 43rd Wessex stayed for 3 weeks. Replacements arrived, became casualties. Were replaced again. A sergeant from the Somerset Light Infantry put it in terms I can't improve. You'd dig a trench and find a hand. British or German, you couldn't tell anymore. So we stopped looking. The 7th Royal Tank Regiment started Jupiter with 52 tanks. By mid-July, they had 11. And by late July, something strange happened. A German defender later wrote that both sides had stopped hating each other. There wasn't energy for hate anymore, just exhaustion. And a grim respect for anyone still alive on that hill. You don't win a battle of attrition. You just survive it slightly better than the other guy. The final toll doesn't capture it. It never does. 10,000 casualties. British and German. Dead, wounded, missing. For a hill that rises barely 100 meters above the sea, just over 300 feet. 10,000 men. Most of their names aren't in any book you'll find. ALIKE helps these stories reach the people who should hear them. We find one of these every week. A battle nobody talks about. A hill with a number instead of a name. Subscribe so you're here when we do. The 43rd Wessex alone lost over 2,000 men. The orchards, those orchards with the apple blossoms, were shattered stumps by August. The wheat was gone. Just overlapping craters filled with chalk dust, twisted metal, and the remains of men from both sides, who'd been killing each other over the same 300 yards for 6 weeks. Barely 275 meters of ground. And here's where it gets complicated. Because, strategically, it worked. Montgomery needed to draw German armor to the British sector so the Americans could break out in the west. Hill 112 was the magnet. Every tiger sitting in those tree lines was a tiger that couldn't stop the Americans at St. Lo. Every SS division grinding itself down on these slopes was a division that wasn't blocking Patton. The British paid for the American breakout in blood. The currency was spent on Hill 112. But here's the question I keep coming back to. Did Montgomery plan it this way? Or did he adapt the narrative afterward to frame a stalemate as strategy? His communications to Eisenhower suggest confidence and design. His messages to Dempsey, his Second Army commander, suggest something closer to frustration. The truth is messier than either version. I think the honest way to say it is this. What followed the failure at Caen was improvisation dressed as intention. The men on the hill didn't know any of that. They just saw the slope, the burning tanks from yesterday, and they went up anyway. What would you have done with those orders? Genuinely. I want to know. Tell me in the comments. The hill was never taken by force. On August 4th, when British patrols crept up the slope, the trenches were empty. The Germans had simply withdrawn. The American breakout had ripped the front apart. The same SS divisions that held this ground ended up trapped in the Falaise pocket weeks later. The tigers and panthers that had burned British tanks on these slopes were themselves burning on the roads east, caught by fighter bombers with nowhere to hide. They held the hill, but they lost the campaign. The soldiers who finally stood on the crest found shell casings, abandoned equipment, and bodies, German and British tangled together, that had been there for weeks. One officer wrote home that the smell reached them before they reached the summit. The August heat had been working on the dead since June. There was no triumph, just a quiet walk up a hill that had cost a generation of Somerset boys. Some of you carry these stories from your own families. If your grandfather served in Normandy, if he mentioned the Odin or the Bocage, or a hill with a number instead of a name, drop it in the comments. Those stories matter more than you think. There's a memorial on the crest now, a simple stone cross placed by the veterans of the 43rd Wessex Division. The inscription doesn't mention how many times they attacked, doesn't mention the tanks, just the division's insignia and the dates. Most visitors don't stay long. There's not much to see. Just a gentle slope, a wheat field, a stone cross. The landscape has healed in ways the history can't. The wheat grows tall again. The orchards were replanted. New trees where the old ones were shattered. If you drive through the Odon Valley today, it looks completely unremarkable. But every spring, when the farmers plow those fields, the earth gives something back. Shell fragments, track links, ammunition casings, sometimes bone. 80 years later, the hill is still returning its dead. Next week, a forest so dense that entire battalions disappeared into it, where the Americans learned that Normandy's bocage was nothing compared to what waited in the Hurtgen. 18,000 casualties. For a forest nobody needed. Nobody.